Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future. Co-hosted by the inquisitive public speaking champion, Mike McVeigh, and energy, economics, and technology expert, Matt Jensen. Join us as we explore all things energy, economic, tech, and political, and how they will affect our future.
So FreightWaves have posted a pretty interesting analysis, commentary, and it's about as U.S.-China relations worsen, expect supply chain chaos. You know, and it's kind of like this this interesting perspective. So we have this really competitive kind of like, you know, the greatest countries economically right now going head to head with US and China. And China's drastically building their military presence, but the US is still dominant militarily in the world. It's been pretty interesting to see how the US, while China's really pushed on business overseas to generate kind of connections to overseas countries and long-term connections that solidify the power of their economy. The U.S. has taken a different approach, really driving forward with our military over, you know, really the last 70 years, especially recently. What we've seen, you know, leaving Afghanistan and jumping directly into Ukraine. That's kind of how we've done it, and also approached it from the business side on a less cutthroat level. But that hasn't been, I think, more of our core focus. But, you know, I digress on that whole topic. But it's really interesting seeing the mechanisms going beyond the scenes as these relations worsen, and the economic the economies are being more used strategically against each other. So China against the U.S. less so as of late, and U.S. against China. So U.S. Did tariffs, as you remember famously when Trump was in office. Recently, the Biden administration put in very strict controls on advanced semiconductors. So basically those top tier semiconductors that really are, you know, kind of your core future technology behind stuff like self-driving capabilities, AI, you know, artificial intelligence, tilted semiconductor chips. All of these chips are basically designed specifically for their tasks. So kind of a good comparison is Bitcoin. You have these Bitcoin mining rigs being specifically developed for, I guess, more efficient energy usage, but specifically to mine Bitcoin. So the same thing broadly happens across the semiconductor industry. So whether it be for defense, artificial intelligence, whatever, these tier chips were just really, there was a huge control put in by the US, and then they also threw a lot of money behind that, trying to build larger, kind of like they're doing batteries too, but larger semiconductor facilities across the US. So Ohio, Texas, etc. But, you know, what you see is really kind of, I would say, more of a Cold War style economic battle going out right now. It's really interesting to see the relations play off. But FreightWaves here really just talks about what we saw during COVID is when the supply chain in China comes to a stall, then since they're kind of like the global supplier of a lot of materials that fit in wider products, that you see global chaos. And this article, I think, just really states the obvious, but it, really American manufacturing and consumerism really rests a lot on the ability for China to deliver these just-in-time goods. And, it's just a really interesting thing to consider, how our lives are going to change as maybe the aggressiveness of this geopolitical tension back and forth between U.S. China goes back and forth. And, it's just, it's interesting too, having China get cut off from these chips through sanctions now, what their next steps are too, and what kind of their strategy around Taiwan kind of, pans out over this, because Taiwan's really a center of advanced chip manufacturing all over the world. So, from everybody that listens to this podcast knows I'm not maybe a huge fan of global wars, right? So I was pretty happy to hear recently about both from Taiwan and China saying that they're looking for diplomatic and not military ways to basically come to some sort of conclusion on how they can be more in tune to this whole one China stuff. So, the U.S. political class kind of poking the bear over there. Business, not so much, but it's just a really, really interesting time globally, where a lot of these relationships, whether it be between the big guys, U.S. and China, or smaller countries, or even neighbors, like we talked about a while ago about how Greece and Turkey are fighting over islands and stuff like that. There's just a lot of chaos energy in the world right now. And with COVID, we saw kind of this chaos, really stimulate in a way that we haven't seen for so long. Really, the last 30 years have been pretty smooth, in terms of global supply chain and stuff like that, or at least gradually improving over time. But so it's my belief that over the next couple of years, expect chaos to continue, especially, I would say, through the next 3 or 4 years. More supply chain shocks, and it may not be COVID related, but globally, I'd say, there's a general term called onshoring, where there was this trend for a long time where people offshored stuff to lower costs. A lot of companies and countries are seeing this strategic need to have closer proximity operations, where you kind of like produce goods close to being where they're assembled, so you don't have to worry about all the supply chain chaos. So, there's general structural trends that are reshaping our global economy right now, from a global supply and shipping, transportation, goods sort of thing. But within kind of, I'd say, almost a battle of characters, who wants to be the global leader going forward, or the global leading groups, whether that be the Western countries led by the U.S. or the BRICS led by China. It's just, there's a lot of like these little competing groups going on right now, and each of them can make a decision that kind of structurally, throws a big stick in your your bicycle rims while you're riding downhill, right? Stops you immediately, and it causes a lot of issues. So I expect the economy to continue to swing, like we've seen up and down over the next couple of years. Have a lot of these supply shocks, but really, as we've seen, there's been a lot of demand destruction caused by higher interest rates. So there's going to be a lot of these little nuanced stories as we go over the next couple of years. And, generally, as we talked about this original article as kicking this off, we'll put it in the show notes, but it's just a really cool time as an economist, as someone that follows this stuff, to see it unfold. So be forewarned. Much more to come.
If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewnextpodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.